interesting when we're in crisis, because this is a state where actually governments and private sector do innovation very well, because it's all hands on deck in a crisis. And so you see government coming together with private sector to rapidly look at new ways to digest information and to respond in effective ways. And this gets even more exciting with AI, whether it's a pandemic or natural disasters. So I work for the Tony Blair Institute. We work with 40 governments around the world with their leaders to help them get things done. And one of the main things we look at is how technology can help them do that faster and better. So in terms of natural disasters, two big things that I think are really important with AI. One is looking at how do we prepare for natural disasters. We'll be able to do this in completely new ways with AI. And then the second is how do we respond to it? In the first, in terms of preparing. So one specific example now, we have satellite imagery of the entire Earth basically every day. There's companies that do this. That's incredible. But it's also a ton of data to actually use. So with AI modeling, we can take the historical satellite data from the last 7 years, put it with the weather data from the last 7 years, put it with what has happened with natural disasters, and we get a very effective model for assessing how this weather is going to impact this area. In the hands of governments, that's an incredibly powerful tool to plan for what's going to happen next. And we have a partnership right now with the government of Philippines, actually, to build out a new model so that they can prepare for landslides. So that's one example. Then in terms of responding, similarly, you can get incredibly rapid assessments of the damage that has been done after a natural disaster using satellite imagery and AI again, which can then help governments plan where do we need to respond first, what is the damage, how do we get there, and after a natural disaster, getting there 24 hours faster or accelerating that path to coordinate all the actors can save lives. So this is just two examples, I would say, that governments should be looking at with private sector to apply AI in the space of natural disasters and climate.
Satellite imagery has transformed journalism, I can tell you that as well. I do a great deal of my work based on satellite imagery.
And just to build on that, I mean, we had similar work cases. The first example, right, of prevention, which I think is super important, and a living example. So we've got over 100 countries that are utilizing an application at this point to prevent flood damage. But more importantly, we can now predict 7 days in advance with relative accuracy as to when a major flood is coming, right, for that perspective. And in some countries, that'll save hundreds of millions of lives. I mean, if you think about it through some of the scenarios over the course of numerous years in 100 countries. So it's becoming real. I mean, we do see that that was an obvious use case, but again, it comes back to there's a tremendous amount of data in weather, right, for that variability. Yeah. We still can't completely predict the weather, but we can come close, right? I think is probably the best way to put it.
Archana, would you like to comment on that?
And another partnership that we have with Google in terms of how do farmers, and this is in the area of response, how do smallholder farmers respond when there is adverse event, but also because of fantastic work that's being done in India, whether it's digital identity, data exchange, which is interoperable but also safe and privately managed, farmer advisories in their own language can actually help them prevent themselves from either pests, but also advisory in terms of how can they increase their produce and how can they be more profitable. Mm-hmm. So it is advisory for climate disaster, advisory in terms of productivity as well as profitability, and some of the extremely path-breaking work that's being done across states. And it can lead to increase in GDP. So it is not only about disaster management, but also in terms of how can you proactively increase profitability of people who are towards the end of the spectrum.
Mr. Lokesh, let me ask you, there are cynics who say that in a country like India, AI might be bad news. We are an agrarian economy to a large extent. We do rely on manual labor. If you do have AI, then there could be a concern about jobs going away. And yet, you speak about the benefits of AI. Can these work together?
I mean, if you look at it, jobs are under threat, but they're typically the white-collar jobs.
Yeah.
I think and every industrial revolution has shown that it creates more jobs than what people lose. History shows that. So I don't believe that AI will reduce the number of jobs, but I think it will change the order of jobs. And then I believe the next, the jobs that are going to get created in the next decades are going to be in areas that we're yet to discover. And that puts a lot of pressure on HRD ministers like me who are trying to figure out the curriculum and the entire ecosystem. Saying that, fundamentally AI is here. It's going to change our lives. And as a government, we are looking at how can we expose women to basic AI tools, students to basic AI tools, because farmers to basic AI tools. I think that can fundamentally transform their lives. It can double their income in certain use cases. So just giving them that access and exposure alone can transform the way they're living.
Do you mind if I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's undeniable that AI is going to disrupt. And so you can either choose to be disrupted or the disruptor. And what I think is so incredible about what the minister has just said is by taking a proactive approach, particularly to education and upskilling, you're enabling your people to be the disruptors and to be the ones driving that job creation.
And
Let's talk about skilling.
Yeah, one of the areas where we are seeing great results, and this is in partnership with Microsoft, is that rural women who were otherwise sitting at home and did not have jobs, now because of AI, can lend their voice for LLM purposes.
Right, large language models. Yeah.
And they are now getting economically benefited. And because of LLM, they're not only getting economically benefited, they're also correcting for algorithms as far as AI is concerned, which can be biased because women's representation is not in those algorithms. So I think there is huge potential in terms of how you can, like the minister said, that how you can look at people who could be marginalized in local communities and what kind of jobs may be available to them, but also correcting for AI as well.
Matt Renner, let's talk a little bit about LLMs, or large language models. They represent huge opportunities but challenges as well. Would you like to see India being more actively involved in the LLM process? The creation of LLMs, large language models.
Yeah, and look, I think it goes back to that. What's that?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd love to see it. The reality behind LLMs and AI and just crunching of all this data as it works through that, the more the better. It just feeds it, makes it more accurate, it makes it more useful. I think to a couple of comments, I love the disruptor comment. But the vast majority of use cases we see globally, and this is across all industries, are less about replacement, more about assistance, right? So making those folks better at what they do to ultimately see more patients, treat their customers better, learn faster, right, as it goes through it. So I think that's a real important point. So the more the better relative to that. The other piece that you mentioned earlier, which I think is highly underrated, but also connects to education, is the applicability of language within India, right? So you look at some of the things we're running, and we're working with educators within India. We're up to 121 different languages that you can translate almost instantly, and that's incredibly powerful when you're trying to communicate and speed education. And again, it goes back to my earlier comment, which is the more the better, right? I mean, this is one technology that actually we encourage more and more participation versus less, or trying to refine it, right? I think it's a much better scenario. So we welcome. I mean, our strategy just is not to do a Google commercial here, but our strategy is to enable and provide the platform so you can build models, right? We have models. We have a ton of models that work on our platform, but we recognize that as a strategy for whether it's a company, a state, it's an institution, wherever that might be, is use multiple models, right?
Yeah.
Bring in more data. So I would say more is better is probably the way we look at it.
Let me just sort of put across a rather basic question to you, Mr. Lokesh, because this is being broadcast to a lot of people who may not understand the nuances of large language models. If you've got AI solving all your problems or your queries, then where is the education? It's not the way that we've learned education. We've had to study. We don't use Grok as I do to sort of get answers to questions. My research as a news anchor has gone down, time spent to a few seconds from a few hours. It helps immensely. But then if you've got an entire generation of people who don't have to do the hard work, then are we not missing something? I mean, creativity doesn't come from AI. Creativity comes from the way we've been educated. Your thoughts?
I mean, you've answered the question in that sense.
Shall we move on?
You answered the question. See, the problem in India is we look at outputs and not outcomes in education. And that's the fundamental shift you're going to see what Andhra Pradesh is going to do. So outcome-based education.
Right.
We'll have time to, we'll be able to free up time for the students to actually critically analyze things, to look at things in a very systematic manner, to answer the questions that otherwise wouldn't have been. Because today I look at my own child, I mean, and the questions that he asks me, I'm like, really? I mean, he's 9 years old. I'm like, it never even occurred to me till my teens.
Right.
I mean, they are learning fast and they love to be challenged. I think the LLMs and the AI models enable them to be challenged even better.
Yeah.
And I think that's the role. Again, do you want to be disrupted or you want to be the disruptor? I think Andhra will be the disruptor in this case.
Would you like to add to my query on AI versus the education, the style of education we were educated in?
I mean, again, I do think it's about envisioning what the future will be, and we don't know exactly. So we have to prepare our children and the next generation for that. And that's going to take creativity. But even, I would say, as we see AI tutors rolling out, they're not replacing teachers, they're enhancing teachers. And so I think some of that we need to just really lean into, go beyond the fear, and, really lean into it. Be the disruptor. Do it in a way that's going to bring benefits for our kids.
Yeah.
One thing that I would add is the fact that otherwise education has been standardized. It's universal, right? The fact that in LMICs or lower and middle income countries, 7 out of 10 children cannot even read by the time that they're in their grade 10, or they're 10 years old, sorry, is now AI allows for adaptive learning, right? It allows for teachers to be more efficient as well. They can train themselves looking at the class. They can revise their curriculum. They can do, build on tools that can allow for educational outcomes, which is what the minister was talking about. So there's definite benefit in terms of what technology allows for. At the same time, efficiency, like you've been speaking about, how much time do you have? Teachers will have more time in terms of designing curriculum that can help children learn faster, better, and deliver the learning outcomes.
Well, you took about 95% of what I was going to say, but there was a little piece left, which is, this is a good example. You asked a question earlier about where commercial and public sector kind of come together. One of the things that's come out of the commercial realm is using AI for personalization, and personalization at the retail level, or whether it could be a manufacturer, but ultimately really gathering data throughout all this period of time to provide to you what you need. And education is such a personal thing, meaning one student to another learns very differently, relative to what they can consume, what they can remember, and what they should be provided. And to your point on curriculum, right? I mean, for an entire class, but down to the individual, that takes a tremendous amount of data to figure out. And it's an interactive process which needs incredible speed to react to it. That's AI, right? So I think there's a real opportunity for personalized education to a certain level. And again, I think it's just one example where a commercial piece has moved its way into a more practical human element, right? Which is no.
Matt, I had a question. Just going into the future, what is the AI interface going to be for us? Right now, we've got chatbots. We've got lots of options amongst them. Some of them talk to us. Some of them don't. Some are text-based. Right. So how are you and I going to engage AI for our lives, let's say 10 years from now?
So every time I get a question that I'm supposed to answer, like for 5 to 10, I always say, can I do 1 to 2? Because it's just a lot easier to figure it out. If you look back 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, the velocity that AI has transformed itself in the different applicability. Look at multimodal across video and voice and across all. It's incredible what's already being put out. I'd be guessing at 10 years. I mean, to be candid with you, there's this concept of AGI as you get into where will we ever cross over into that? There's a lot of philosophies, folks a lot smarter than I am that could give you an opinion on that, whether that will ever come to fruition, because it is a debate, and when it will come into fruition. But that's kind of the next frontier if we ever get there. I feel like a lot of what we're doing now is going to refine, but it's amazing how many companies that have spun up that are AI related right now, just because of what it's enabling to do, to get better at voice, better to go across language, to get across everything from sight or the entire experience that you can now consume multimodal wise, and most of the models can do that now. So it's tough to say 5 to 10 years. I think you're definitely going to see this continue to accelerate with consuming multiple types of data and combining it into one experience for individuals. And I think that will continue from that perspective.
Emily, there's the entire issue of regulation.